Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our 201 Town Hall meeting. On July 21st, the admin team, we presented our plan for focusing primarily on in-person learning. We also touched on remote learning. And tonight, I'm joined with members of our admin team. We have Linda Clowwitter, who is our Director of Student Services and also our Early Childhood Center. Nadine Norris is going to be our moderator this evening, and she's also our Director of Teaching, Learning, and Technology. Amy Quattrone, Assistant Principal at the Junior High. Megan Burbink, Assistant Principal at the High School. Jack Balderman, High School Principal. Lindsay Peterzak, our Principal at Manning. Tim Weiler, Miller Principal. John Jonak is actually joining us on his vacation in Wisconsin. He's the Principal of the Junior High. And I'm Kevin Carey, Superintendent of Schools. As I mentioned, we presented in great detail our plan for the opening of our 2020-2021 school year. And that board meeting is available on our website. So tonight we'll highlight each of the school's plans, but we're not going to go into as much detail. And then we will be entertaining your questions. Some questions have been submitted ahead of time, but you can continue to submit questions to Nadine Norris, that's N-Norris, N-O-R-R-I-S, at CUSD201.org. And Nadine will do her best looking at those questions. And we do know that many of you submitted comments as well. And this evening is to focus on the questions, but the admin team, we are reviewing all those comments. We are taking those into consideration as we're finalizing our decision. But the focus this evening is going to be on the questions. We're going to go until about 7:30 this evening. If we still haven't gotten to some of the questions, we will be generating an FAQ page that will be connected to our webpage. And so all of your questions will be answered. And even if you submit questions after we're off the air or in the next couple of days. The one thing that I do want to mention is with regards to remote learning, we did receive some questions about remote learning. And the State Board of Education, they finally released their guidelines for remote learning. They're referring to it as Remote Learning 2.0. That was released about noon on Thursday. And so we are reviewing that document. And so we are tweaking our remote learning plans as a result. But I can assure you that the remote learning will be definitely different than the spring. It'll be more robust, higher level accountability in terms of daily attendance, grading of student work. There has to be, combination of Zoom meeting, Google meeting, and then also student engagement of 5 hours each day. And so it's definitely more robust. And so I just want to assure parents who have questions about that, that definitely will look different than what it did in the spring. At this time, though, I'm going to ask each of our administrators, we're going to start with Linda Clowwitter, Director of Early Childhood, to give the highlights of what our South School Early Childhood program will look like in terms of in-person learning. Linda?
I thank you. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. As Mr. Carey said, we're going to be providing brief comments just as a foundation to the questions that you are going to share, that you're asking of us. So I'm just going to go through some of the specific points, and the full document is on the website, again, as Mr. Carey has referenced. So in terms of early childhood, we currently have morning and afternoon sessions, and we have one full day classroom. So I'm going to be talking about potential changes that are specific to those rooms. So our half day sessions will be cut to 2 hours daily rather than the 2.5. And then additional distance learning will address the 30 minutes that have been cut. The full day classroom will meet for 4 hours instead of the 6 that that classroom currently meets. All of our children will wear masks. We understand we're talking about 3 to 5-year-olds, but we'll do lots of preparation in terms of making that happen. And we also will build mask breaks into our daily schedule. All of our staff, and I think this goes without saying, and you'll hear this from each of our administrators, but all of our staff will wear masks and other PPE as needed for the individual roles that they perform. Our centers, which is really a kind of a mainstay of early childhood programming, our centers will be reconfigured to allow for a more limited selection of activities at this time. And that reconfiguration will reflect social distancing. And also we're working on manipulatives and supplies being individualized for each of our students. So each of them has their own sort of toolkit that they can use for the work that they're going to be doing. Related services such as our speech and our occupational therapy will take place during that in-person learning. In some cases, there will be the need for pull-out services, and if that happens, those folks that provide those services will be following all of the protocols, all the guidelines to have a safe and a hygienic environment. Transportation will continue as it has in the past in terms of students that are eligible. We know that some parents are interested in driving their children under these conditions right now, and so we are happy to accommodate that. And for our children that will take the bus, we have safety protocols in place that have been developed in collaboration with the bus companies. And other than that, I think the rest of the information is on the website, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Peterzik.
Actually, we'll go with Tim Weiler first.
I'm so sorry. I was going with MA instead of MI. I apologize. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mrs. Clowder. So the Miller Elementary School is slotted for our kindergarten and first grade programming district-wide this school year. We would be recommending a 3.5-hour school day for all students. If we started a half day in school learning with the remainder of the learning taking place once the kids get home in a remote learning setting. So our teachers would be working with the students for 3.5 hours in the building during the morning, and then in the afternoon, working with the students in a remote learning capacity 5 days a week. So try to keep the schedule as consistent as possible for other students that do come into the building each day. We will be working very closely with the 2nd through 5th grade building, which would be the teachers and staff over at Manning School and Ms. Peterzak. And we will be working on starting and end times to be in collaboration with Manning School. We'll be working very hard and diligently with all our students that receive EL services, special education services, and resource minutes to take place as much as possible during the 3.5 hours of in school, but also working with the state and our district special ed team on what that looks like in a remote learning setting, because we know some families might have the option, they might opt into learning from home. There will be no breakfast or lunch eaten at school every day. We would be sending lunch and breakfast home each day after school. So breakfast would be given for the following day and lunch would be given for the same day, and students would just have to make sure those items would get stored in the fridge if it's items that would need to be refrigerated. And we will be using we currently have 16 classrooms that can accommodate 14 or less students in a very safe and social distancing capacity with the classroom teacher. We're trying to keep our students self-contained in the room, as well as provide breaks. I love the term that Mrs. Clowder used last week, mask breaks or brain breaks or physical activity breaks, use the outside as much as possible, but also work on creating a plan for the days that we cannot use outside if there is a plan on using any space indoors, which right now we are still working on. So that's in a nutshell our plan for half-day AM only school. And I will turn it over to Ms. Peterzak, which will talk a little bit about Manning and the 2nd through 5th grade programming.
Thank you, Tim. I think you did most of the heavy lifting tonight, which is great. 2-5 looks very similar and looking for a 3.5-hour to a 4-hour half-day AM only option for in-person with the remote part of the day for a potential of being flexible depending on services, enrichment, intervention. So once we get a better understanding of what students will be in the building versus what students opt for a remote option is when we can really plan into the deeper levels of what that would look like. So I don't think there's anything different than what K1 stated. We have just by sheer size, 25 classrooms, and that's not looking at additional spaces of art room and library to use as classroom space. So our 2nd and 3rd graders will be on the 1st floor, 4th and 5th on the second floor. And we are looking to have our grade levels stay together, including the dual language with their appropriate grade level. So I think those are the only additional pieces to the elementary model that I can think of.
Lindsay. And now we'll go to John.
All right, welcome everybody. And in regards to Westmont Junior High School for next year, the in-person model includes splitting the grade levels essentially in half. Half of the students would have AM 3 hours and 20 minutes, would have AM in-person instruction. The other half of Westmont Junior High School would have the PM. We are looking at using 9 classrooms for the approximately 150 students that we have in the morning. And so each grade level would have, so approximately 50 students per grade level would have 3 classrooms that they would be broken down into. In those classrooms, they would have social studies or science, that's going to be every other day. Math is going to be every day, along with English language arts, which is every day. Students will have a resource period or a STAR period in which we'll be looking at resource minutes being met in accordance with IEP, along with extra time with our English language learners and our students that have 504s. And then we'll also be looking at SEL and goal setting, SEL being social emotional learning needs of our students. Along with that, we have an exploratory period. Those exploratory classes, depending on some new information that we're getting, may be changing, but those will be about a half hour long. So once that A group of students, that 150 students are done in the morning, we'll be having our B group of students, the other half of the school, coming in the afternoon. Those classrooms, those other 9 classrooms, are going to be located in the other side of the building. So we won't be using those same classes for the first group compared to the second group. Along with that, for the exploratory classes, there may be some movement of students, but very little. They're pretty much primarily going to be staying in those classrooms, those 9 classrooms that they are associated with, and our teachers would be moving, for the most part, back and forth from class to class in order to meet our students' needs. There are going to be, because of the instructional day being about 3 hours and 20 minutes, there are going to be parts of that instructional day that occur remotely every day. And that is going to complete up to the 5 hours, a little bit over the 5 hours that the Illinois State Board of Education is looking for. Additionally, we are looking at every Wednesday being a remote learning day, so we can do deep cleaning on that Wednesday. Ms. Quattrone, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you did a really great job. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. And then with that being said, we'll pass it off to Mr. Balderman over at the high school.
Well, I think we lost Jack. So I think he has to increase his bandwidth. So Megan, can you introduce the high school model?
I will do my darndest. So we will be running an AB schedule similar to the junior high in the sense that there will be AB groupings of students, and there will also be a remote learning day on Wednesdays as well, full remote for all students. They will be alternating AB days that are full days for students, where they will attend each of their regularly scheduled classes within the school day. And the students, not the teachers, will be transitioning from class to class. The class sizes, as we cut them in half, will be potentially no more than 9 to 10 students per classroom to allow for social distancing within the classroom itself. We will also put up through our hallways one-way directionals and stairwells to promote social distancing in the hallway and increase supervision out there as well. We will have lunch during the school day, but it'll be done in 3 separate areas to promote small group lunching, keeping social distancing during lunch. It would be the only time in the day when the students would potentially not have their mask on the full time. Students would be required to wear their masks all day. We don't necessarily have the opportunity to incorporate any of those other breaks for masks, if you will. And I think that highlights all of the main points for the high school plan. at this time. So students would be in school in person for 2 days of the week and remote for 3.
Thank you, Megan. And I want to, before we start the Q&A portion, I just want to thank our school community for your patience. We know that, you know, having this information and as we're trying to make our final decision, that's impacting you and your family, and we appreciate your patience. I know you can appreciate how fluid this situation is. And as we get information from the Page Public Health, the State Board of Ed, the governor's office, that impacts our decision-making a little bit. And so it's been very fluid. Our plan is next Tuesday, August 4th, at our board meeting, is to make a recommendation to our Board of Education as to how we believe it's the best way to start our school year. And please know that our students' safety and well-being and our staff's safety and well-being and their health is our top priority. And so whatever decision we end up making is going to, you know, that's the major consideration as we finalize this. At this time, I'm going to turn over to Nadine, and she's going to be our moderator as she shares with us some of the questions that we're receiving from our school community.
Okay, the first set of questions are about registration. Parents would like to know when and how registration is being done. And also someone asked if there'd be a checkbox stating whether or not they're registering for hybrid or online or remote only learning when they register.
And in terms of registration, we're going to do all remote registration this year. We're finalizing that, and we'll be opening up registration soon, and that information will go out to our school families, and we'll be asking families to upload their proof of residency. We'll still be asking for that. And then in terms of the selection process, we are asking families to respond to the survey that went out, and we can send out another reminder, but we're asking families to select via the survey whether or not they want in-person or remote learning. And we are thinking of establishing a deadline. As I mentioned, the 4th of August is when we'll be sharing with the board a recommendation. And so we're going to be asking for families to finalize their choice by that Friday, August 7th, so that we can plan for the opening of the school year.
So have we discussed possibly postponing the reopening by even a month or two, or eliminating winter break or spring break or PLC days and as necessary to catch up with and still have some form of summer break?
We did delay the start to August 24th. Originally, well, I should qualify that. I have a special board meeting Wednesday, and the real purpose of the board meeting is for the board to finalize their selection for the 3 board seats we have vacant right now. They went through an interview process. They'll be discussing those interviews and selecting 3 individuals to recommend to fill those open seats. But one of the few action items we have is I'm asking the board to approve an amended calendar. Originally, we were slated for students starting on August 19th. We're going to delay that to August 24th to provide our staff more time to either finalize plans for in-person or remote learning. In terms of delaying it more than that, there has been some conversation about possibly opening remotely and then delaying the in-person. But many of the individuals that we have been talking to, if there is a spike in the COVID-19 virus, that'll happen later in the fall. And so it makes more sense for us to open as close to our normal start time, so that if, you know, we can get as many days of in-person learning before possibly having to switch to remote because of spikes in the virus. And so at this time, we're hoping to, if we go with in-person, to open with students August 24th and hopefully get in as many days with our students as we can.
Related to that question, there's a question with regard to exploring later start dates because of the air conditioning. So would you consider opening up later because the teachers will be able to open up their windows rather than using the air conditioner, especially if you're over 50% capacity in the building, anticipating that this is the case with the elementary level?
Well, I might ask for Tim and Lindsay to weigh in on the elementary buildings, but our high school and junior high are air conditioned. Probably 8 or 9 years ago, I think we put window units in every classroom at Manning and Miller. And so the classrooms are air conditioned. And so I'll ask Lindsay and Tim, though, to weigh in as to, you know, if they think that the buildings are comfortable when we start the school year.
You got it. This is Tim from Miller. Just when we see a huge difference in not only the hallways but classrooms when we do allow doors to be open, because the hallways are not air conditioned on the first or second floor at Miller, but there are quite a few classrooms that have not only window, they don't have window units, they actually have actual AC units that that are probably more efficient and effective than window units. But we definitely see a spike in heat in the gymnasium, and we're trying real hard not to have classes set up in the gym, but the hallways and classrooms, as long as teachers utilize their air units, they are a little warmer than some of the end classrooms that are a little more updated at the end of the hallways, but classes definitely can function at a very nice temperature, especially at Miller, looking at keeping the class sizes at below 50% capacity. We're trying to keep classes 14 students or below.
So just to clarify that question, there's a concern about the circulation of air when you have the air conditioning on.
That would not be a question necessarily that I could answer, other than our air units pretty much stay on because of the activity and level, like through October.
So we'll put that on the FAQ perhaps for a later time.
In terms of the air circulation is, you know, adequate, it's appropriate. And so there really isn't a concern about the, you know, the quality of air in our classrooms.
Okay, the next set of questions is with regard to our staff, particularly for our teachers. We'll start with, is it true that the WTA has concerns about the options that the administrative team has presented? How will this affect the school year? And does the WTA have a counter offer plan that the district is considering? If so, what is that?
At our July 21st board meeting during public comment, the WTA did express some concerns about bringing students and staff back in person at the beginning of the year. And that's something that we're currently meeting with the WTA and working through some of their concerns. Some of their concerns revolve around how personal time off will be treated if a staff member is asked to quarantine at home. And so we're working through all those things. And so the only way that we would propose in-person learning is if our employees were comfortable with that plan.
So could someone explain what protocols are in place to ensure the protection of the teachers, and what kind of PPE and what kind of safety has been designed to protect the teachers?
All the staff members and students will be provided with face masks. Everybody is going to be given 3 reusable face masks that they can use. Staff and students can also utilize their own face masks. Face masks will be required inside all of our schools. Even with social distancing, we're maintaining 6 feet of social distancing in our classrooms, which is what is recommended. We're also increasing our cleaning protocols, and all of our custodial and maintenance will have a punch list that they're required to follow. And we'll be sanitizing our classrooms on a regular basis, common contact areas, so doorknobs, light switches, all those areas, restrooms, all those areas will be cleaned, sanitized on a regular basis. And then where appropriate, plastic barriers will also be utilized to protect our students and staff.
how will the teachers and other staff members, in case of a possible or actual COVID infection, how will that be addressed if any of the teachers get sick? In addition to that, will at-risk teachers with health conditions that put them at a greater risk for COVID, be eligible for unemployment if they elect not to teach in person?
Those are some of the things that we are working through and fall into personnel issues, but we're working through. Some may be eligible for FMLA leave or other types of leaves. And so those are things that are worked through on a employee by employee basis. And so those are some things we'll work through. In terms of if we end up having a student or a staff member either test positive or diagnosed with COVID-19, that is something that we work very closely with DuPage Public County Health on. They'll provide us the guidance and they will advise us as to who needs to quarantine result of that diagnosis. They'll also do the contact tracing and they'll reach out and contact individuals who may have come in close contact. And this is where the mask and the 6 feet of spacing comes in, because the way the public health department will define close contact is if individuals are within less than 6 feet of one another for more than 15 minutes. And so if we maintain the 6 feet and minimize close contact for less than 15 minutes, everybody wearing masks, then that minimizes the number of people who have to quarantine both students and staff. So that's very important for us to maintain those guidelines. And again, we'll be working very closely with DuPage County Public Health, and they'll provide us guidance in those situations.
One of our parents asked us, is relying on the DuPage Health Department to do contact tracing timely and practical?
They assured us that they will, it will be timely and practical. They said even they will perform it on the weekend, 24 hours a day, and be reaching out to school districts on a regular basis. And so they assured us that it will be timely.
If a student has a history of a health condition that presents a symptom that's similar to COVID, so for example, headaches, will that be taken into account when we are doing certification for COVID-related symptoms?
Yes, I mean, students, we have on record students' individual health related concerns. And so we have that on record. And so we will be working with those families. Our nurses will be working with those families. And, you know, there's a difference between a student has a headache versus if it's over several days. And so we will be working with our families, and we know our families, and our nurses will be working with our families. So we won't be, you know, jumping to conclusions if some symptoms are seen.
What will the notification process be if anyone in our schools, teachers, staff, or students exhibit COVID symptoms and ultimately testing positive for COVID?
Obviously, we'll have to follow HIPAA laws, but we will be, you know, sharing with families if we do have positive tests. We will be sharing that with our families. We won't be able to give specific names, but we will share that information so that families are aware. And then if there is close contact, DuPage Public Health will be reaching out and contacting those families individually or those staff members individually, letting them know that close contact did occur.
Let's see, I think we've covered those. Let's see if I did. How will the district faculty be checking students for fevers, and will they be checking for symptoms of COVID, such as congestion, coughing, and runny nose? So how will the district faculty be checking students for symptoms, including fevers?
We will be asking parents to self-certify their children that they're symptom-free. But then upon arriving to school, we will be doing temperature checks. Our admin team some of our staff members will be involved in that process, but we will be doing temperature checks when students arrive, and also we'll be doing temperature checks for our staff members as well.
And what about on the bus?
The plan right now, I believe, is to test students before they leave the bus. We contract with Westway. They're not comfortable doing the temperature checks, but our families, again, will report that their child is symptom-free before boarding a bus, but we will be doing temperature checks before students leave the bus.
All right, the next set of questions is with regard to remote learning. What is the threshold in which the school will make a decision to have in-person versus all remote? Is there a 2-week positivity rate that we must remain under, i.e. 5% at a sustained 2-week period? Who will establish that threshold, the state, the county, our region, or are we as the school districts, do we select our own threshold safety to decide whether or not we're going to remain open or go all remote?
The school district won't be selecting that threshold. Right now, we're in phase 4 of the governor's reopening plan for Illinois. And that's what allows schools to consider reopening. We're in a region with, I believe, Kane County. And so if there is a spike in our region, then the governor or the DuPage County Public Health Department may tell schools that they need to close and go to remote learning. The governor can always, as he did last March, through executive order, close schools. And so that decision to close schools will be done in conjunction with the Illinois or the DuPage Public Health, or would come from the governor's office.
There's a series of questions with regard to remote learning. So the parents are asking, what will remote learning consist of? What is remote learning 2.0? And there's a series of questions around what remote learning looks like for every grade, elementary, junior high, and high school. And in our talk at the board meeting, we did talk about this additional accountability and the fact that there's structures in place where there must be 5 hours of learning per day. Now, the new guidelines also include 2.5 hours of interaction, real-time interaction between the students and the teachers. Could you each take some time to address remote learning for your own grade level? In addition, could you also include accountability factors for how you will do accountability for teachers and with regard to students as well? And while you're doing that, there's a lot of questions you have to catch up on. So be back in a minute.
Want to start us off, Jack?
Sure. Well, the difference is there's going to be more scheduled learning, first of all, and that's a huge difference for us. The second is there'll be accountability measures. So the other part of that is that, in the past, there was no diminishing of grades. So there's a little bit more accountability, obviously, from the student end that we know about. The other thing is that our teachers have been sharing and learning from each other and engaging in some remote learning staff development to increase the quality of the teaching that they're doing. So as far as accountability, I mean, we always monitored student progress, which our teachers take accountability for. Our teachers gladly embrace the idea that they're accountable for student learning. So to make sure that our number one priority is to make sure that our students are learning and the teachers are held accountable for that. So we take that very seriously. We always have. And then we have a series of measures to see whether or not we're having success there. As far as, the results we receive from student achievement, different measurements there, also to see if teachers and students alike are following through with the assignments and completion of work. Those are some of the accountability measures. But even in the spring, and I think I speak for everybody, we really followed through, and the vast majority of our students exhibited success. And as I mentioned at the board meeting last week. This is one accountability measure, but close to 70% of our students participated in advanced placement national testing, where we had the best results we've ever had in the school's history. So, but going forward, we'll continue to monitor the programs the teachers are presenting, and we'll monitor student learning. We'll intervene with students in an intense way when they're not having success. And so we believe that we can present very strong remote learning opportunities for all of our students. And our teachers want to be in person, there's no doubt, but there are safety concerns that have expressed, and they really are committed to delivering the best remote learning experience possible for our students.
Have anything to add, Jen?
Definitely. So I think we know that at least at Westmont Junior High School and Westmont High School, there's at least going to be one day of remote learning that's going to occur regardless of whether there is a time that we are completely remote learning as a district or not. And that is on Wednesdays. And so similar to what Mr. Balderman Jack is saying, is that it's different rules. We realize our teachers have been being professionally developed during the last week of the school year for 2019-2020. Additionally, we've been working with our instructional coach and media specialist. The team leaders, Amy and myself, are going to be meeting on the August 4th. We're going to be going over more. There's going to be a heavy emphasis on the essential standards, and everyone that is familiar with state standards or the Common Core standards knows that there's a long list of standards. We're going to be focusing on those essential standards that were identified by our teachers over the last year and a half. Specifically, we're looking to assess our students within the first week of school so that we can find out on the iReady assessment, the diagnostic, where our students are at, so that we can build them up from those locations. And so I really appreciate the leadership, the district leadership specifically, allowing us to have a little bit more time so that we can continue professionally developing our students, our parents, our teachers during that first week of school. It's hard focusing in a McDonald's parking lot. I apologize, everybody. But definitely more accountability also for our students, in that before, if they were not showing up to class, there was little that we could do in regards to the state's plan for accountability measures. And now there's much more that we can do. And so I appreciate that, because we're going to need all of those tools to help us be successful and for our students to be successful.
Lindsay, anything?
I would say for the elementary, in addition to a lot of things that the junior high and high school have stated, is really being intentional in the type of learning that we're providing our students. 5 hours is great, but if it's not done well and it's not structured in an appropriate way, our students could struggle. And so maximizing some of the best practices we use in the classroom, such as small group instruction, how do we leverage the tools that we have in order to provide that in a remote setting? So I think that's a big piece. I think we're also excited, as I haven't used that word very often, but some of the transitions that the elementary has made with its curriculum mapped, and each year looking at the scope and sequence to revise, and then the implementation of standards-based grading allows for students to show their progress throughout and provide feedback along the way, which really helps us to have an ongoing communication tool through Otis and Seesaw with parents and with students. So kids can know and parents can know exactly where they're at, whether it be remote or in person, and how, in which ways to improve, not just by saying you're meeting, but or you're not meeting, or you're doing this well or not this well, but how do we improve? How do we maintain understanding the skills that we've acquired? Tim, did I miss anything?
Just two things I wanted to add were on the accountability piece. We have invested the last 4 days of last school year really working on enhancing our remote learning plans with all our teachers that are coming back this year. And so we wanted to highlight that our families are going to see a very common thread, a common platform at the K-1-2 level. We're dedicating our time and resources into using what's called the Seesaw platform. So it's very easy, user-friendly for the younger students. And then we have just taken another big leap into Otis, which is a online platform that we'll use regardless of being a remote learning or not. So those are two things that I'm excited about, that all families can kind of get on the same page and help support each other on. And then the second piece is we're dedicated to, with our standards-based report card, if we go into remote learning, our teachers are already planning on what some of those essential standards are going to be. Obviously, in a smaller time frame, we cannot focus on all the standards that we want to in a regular, our typical school day is 7.5 hours. So if we're meeting with students for 5 hours, we definitely are going to have a couple essential standards that we're going to really focus on. And those are going to be not only identified, but communicate with families ahead of time so they know what the kids are going to be accountable for. And the teachers are going to be working towards those common goals as well. So common standards with grades, and then the platforms are two things that I'm excited about if we go into remote learning.
Thanks, Tim. Linda, do you have anything for the early childhood?
It's been interesting to work with remote learning in terms of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. But I think that our team has done a great job. And I would emphasize that job that they've done has really been in strong collaboration with parents, because when you think about it, you're really not putting a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old by a computer by himself or herself and hoping that they're going to work independently. It's really a strong collaboration with parents. So we are learning from what we did in the spring, and we're building upon that, and we're talking more about pre-recorded lessons that parents can access upon demand. We're talking about the way that our related service providers come into our preschool households and how they provide speech and occupational therapy through a Zoom platform, what that looks like, how the children get the most out of that. Talking about really supplementing that remote learning with hands-on packets that the teams already talked about and plan to deliver to each of the households. They did this last year. That worked out very well, and so they're planning on doing that again. And the students have an opportunity to really show their efforts, show the products that they are so proud of in terms of the, we have an application that our parents used in the spring, and it worked out very well. So the children could send their work in, and the teachers could comment on it, and classmates could comment on it. And it was a very nice way to stay connected. So those are just some of the things that we'll do to continue the remote learning if that's the decision.
And then the other piece, yeah, John?
Yeah, Mr. Carey, I just wanted to mention that, that the Westmont Junior High School, along with, because the elementary were so successful in utilizing Otis, and we know that one of the concerns was for our parents was that they were going to Google Classroom or they were going to Otis, and they didn't know really where to find everything. And so along with the elementaries, we've decided at Westmont Junior High School to use Otis as the student management system. So all of the student works for Westmont Junior High School, the teachers will be posting to Otis. So that will be accessible to our parents as well.
And the only thing I was going to add to the discussion, Tim referenced that our parents remember we utilized 4 of the remote learning planning days at the end of the school year. We reserved those, and at the end of the school year, our staff was involved in staff development, planning for this coming year in the event that we needed to utilize remote learning. And one of the things we did do, we sent a survey last spring asking our parents about their experience with remote learning, some of the things we were doing well, some of the things we could do better. And information from that survey shaped those days so that we could address some of the concerns our families had. And then the other piece too is, depending upon what conditions we're in terms of remote learning, the other thing we've been discussing as a district is we know that some of our students still need periodically have contact with their teachers. And so bringing in small groups of students who maybe are struggling a little bit with the remote learning platform, bringing those students in to get some additional support from teachers, that would be part of our plan as well.
And I just wanted to add that with regard to the specifics and what the actual remote learning, what it actually looks like, will depend on the individual grade level and content area, but across the board, it will include some type of learning management system where all of the assignments and the activities and the calendars of all the different meetings will be available so that students have a structure and a schedule so they can keep track of their assignments. All content will be our own. We're not going to hire any third-party company. We're not going to deliver any learning through any type of computerized, pre-packaged program. It will all be our own. Students will have access to the same rigorous content that they have access to in face-to-face, as Jack mentioned. Our students were able to finish their AP classes and take those tests. Last year in March, they'll begin their AP courses and remotely if that's the decision that parents make. But the specifics will be communicated from the child's teacher. So sometimes it's like we're talking sometimes in these kind of generalities, and that's tricky because we can't necessarily answer specifics for every grade level. The other thing is I would stress that the interaction between the teacher and the parent is essential. So immediately, if there's any challenges, if there's any issues with scheduling, if there's any reason why the student can't be online during their scheduled time, if there's any content that's been challenging for this child and parents aren't able to support them, if they feel like the teacher's not making contact frequently enough, all of those types of issues must be communicated to the teachers immediately. Don't let that simmer, or don't let those kinds of situations stew, so that we come into a situation where the child is, a couple weeks have gone by and the child's struggling and there's no way, there's been no interaction or no specific request or no specific support requested. Don't let that happen. So that's kind of because we're still kind of getting questions about trying to clarify, and I don't know if we could do any better at this time, but just know that there's a learning management system, and there's designs, there's schedules, and there's calendaring that's going to be taking place, and that those individual students will hear from their teachers as soon as that school year begins. I still have a lot of questions coming in with regard to safety, so let's go on, and then what might happen is at the end I'll have to just kind of read those questions one by one, because I have maybe another 30 questions that have come in, so let's keep going. Will there be a nurse on staff at every school?
That is our plan. We're getting ready to present one candidate for board approval. We're in the process of interviewing a second one. So we have five schools, and we should have a nurse at both elementary schools, the junior high and the high school, and then the nurse that would be assigned to Miller would be spending some time at South. We would anticipate that would be a minimal amount of time, and that the vast majority of his or her time would be at Miller.
Okay, these next set of questions are for the elementary principals. Does the administration believe it's possible to have students wear masks and social distance? Let's start with the bus. How will we monitor that?
I think we've talked about with the bus of having assigned seats. There's definitely concern of this bus, and I think Mr. Carey talked about it at the last board meeting of the bus drivers still needing to transport the kids safely. But we're hoping with setting up, protocols for kids and reminding them up front of what we expect, that helps. We also have the data from the survey of how many kids would be taking the bus. So once again, we're planning for worst case scenarios, but it seems like less than 30% or about 30% of students would be riding the bus. So that helps us even more as we plan the fine details. And then once students arrive, we talk about having a protocol in place before they leave the bus to do temperature checks to make sure that once kids move off the bus, they're going straight to a location, straight to the classroom.
Why is it that elementary designed their learning in the way that you did versus following the AB cohorts like the junior high and the high school did. Now the junior high and the high school are kind of attacking that in a different way, and we'll ask the junior high and high school to talk about their thought process in a few minutes. But why is it that that you made the decision to get as many students that want to come to school in at the same time?
So at the last board meeting, Mrs. Clowder, myself, and Ms. Peterzak identified that we know our age level and our group of kids that we work with. Having a consistent schedule, whether it's an hour, 2.5 hours, 4 hours, it's very beneficial for students to have a very consistent schedule on a daily basis. We also know the constraints that some families have with providing daycare and putting them on a B schedule might be very strenuous or stressful for them to find those pieces. So we wanted to try to create as consistent of a schedule as possible for the 5 school days during the week.
Mr. Weller, you talked about utilizing 16 classrooms. Could you kind of give some insight into how those will be staffed?
Sure. So we currently have 5 teachers that are certified to teach kindergarten and 5 teachers that are certified to teach first grade from last school year. So we're using current certified staff for those positions. And then we would utilize all our specialists, interventionists to take small class sizes while we're in stage 4 of half-day learning and keep class sizes very small. It's a model that some states out in Arizona, Texas have already talked about and planned for if they're going to go back to in-school learning. Keeping class sizes small is essential due to social distancing. And so we just would be utilizing all our certified staff, spread them out in the 16 classes from PE teacher to our music teacher to our reading specialists. Everyone would take a cohort of kindergarten and first grade students, and we would be able to accommodate 16 classes with 16 of our staff members on a half-day model.
Okay, so, and then Ms. Peterzak, your classrooms, talk a little bit about how you're going to, your classrooms size might be a little bit bigger, how you're going to ensure that there's social distancing and that students will comply with wearing their face masks and comply with social distancing.
So Manning, first of all, will house older kids, so it's a little bit different, and we hope, but I'm confident that students can abide by the social distancing and wearing the masks as well. Our classrooms are much larger, and that's taking into account worst case scenario of full enrollment. And as of 3:53 today, we're looking at about 35 to 40% of students opting for remote. So looking at even potentially not having those classrooms be at max space. But like Tim said, in a scenario where if there is some type of shift in the data that comes in the next 24 hours or so, looking at using reading specialists and some of our other specialist teachers, if need be, to artificially break into an A-B group, if need be, just to make sure that we are keeping with social distancing. Manning has quite a few extra spaces that can be utilized, even without going into the gym. So we have the space. It's finding the logistical numbers of who is going to be in the building and how do we break that down to remain safe.
Okay, and this question is for the junior high. How will students be assigned to groups A or groups B? Actually, both junior high and high school, you guys can take turns answering this question. How will students be assigned group A or group B? Will it be based on schedule or some other factors? And will you take into consideration that you could match students by family so that they're on the same schedule, either within the high school, junior high, or across the high school and junior high?
John, could I just take a quick, we're planning at this time of going by alpha and splitting it down the middle. So A through L and then M through Z.
Okay, and then in regards to the junior high school, we are looking at families. So if we have a family that's got a sibling, a child in 8th grade and 6th grade, we're making sure that they're on the same schedule. We are looking similarly to what the high school is talking about, but then on top of that, we are looking at some of our subgroups to ensure that we're able to meet all of the criteria with a good division of students. And so there are some subgroups that we need to be cognizant of, specifically students with IEPs. We want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. But other than that, we are looking at AB, or we're looking at doing something similar to what the high school is doing.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Ms. Guttron, go ahead.
No problem. We're also taking a look at our families in the district who have students in the elementary grades. And so we're using that as a priority system too, to place those students in the AM category.
Okay. These questions are for the high school. Tell me about what's going on with sports.
Well, currently our sports teams are practicing, and so we're preparing for a season, but there's still some decisions that need to be made from the IHSA and the ISBE. And of course, if we went to remote learning, a complete remote learning, there would not be sports in the fall.
And then talk about the choir practice of the various choirs.
Yeah, well, there's a special situation there, of course, as people know. Even with reduced class sizes, there's an increase in the when students are singing, pronunciating, that's causing additional concerns for us. So that'll be something, even with spacing, that we might have to reconsider. The band we've talked about, especially, and this is going to be limited based on the weather, but normally the band does practice outside during the opening of the school year. They do their marching routines in our parking lot, and so they'd be outside and they could adhere to social distancing. And at the current time, we're still planning to go forward with the band camp, but we may have to make some special accommodations with choir because of the nature of, communication and so forth.
Okay. Could you briefly go over the protocols for driver's ed for, will sophomores still have driver's ed if they're using remote learning? And if kids are using remote learning, how will they do their behind the wheel?
Well, we have done behind the wheel in a reduced fashion through most of the summer. And that's our plan, to try to get as much of that done as possible. And I don't see any reason why we couldn't continue with the class portion. But if we go to remote learning, it might be very difficult to do the behind the wheel while we're in remote learning.
To give a little more detail, as Mr. Balderman said, this summer we've had behind the wheel, and we're following the guidelines from ISBE. The instructor wears a mask. There's 2 students in the car, both wearing masks. The car is sanitized before the next group of students, and so we'll follow those protocols. The only thing that would prohibit us from continuing behind the wheel is if, again, there's something from the state that shuts down driver's ed, which is what happened in the spring.
And can I also add that we chunked the hours more closely, like we made larger chunks for the students to complete it, so there was less turnover of students in the cars on any, so only one small group of students would use the car for the 3 days, and there would not be like a constant rotation of students. So we condensed the hours into a shorter time period for a longer length of time, so that there was less cross contamination.
Okay, these are continuing for high school and safety guidelines. Is there a plan for the high school to have teachers rotate the rooms instead of this, and the students stay in the same room during in-person learning? And how will they?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, because of the way the high school schedule is structured, that's just not feasible. So we do plan on wiping down the desks between periods, but the idea of teachers rotating, as the elementary schools have, and maybe the junior high too, have looked at and are planning on doing, it's just not feasible. So
we have so many singleton classes that it's really no two students really, even in the same grade level, have identical schedules. So it's necessary for the students to rotate.
Are there situations where the same class is going to be used in concurrent periods, and how will those classrooms be cleaned in between periods?
And you mean one after another? Is that what
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some breaks in the day where more extensive cleaning can take place. But, and please keep in mind too, we're talking about social distancing. We're talking about deep cleaning several times a week. We're talking about an average at most 9 students in the classroom. But it's a different situation at the high school where the students will be rotating the classes. It's just, if you think about the way a high school schedule works, students don't follow each other in groups. So that's just not feasible to have kids stay stationary and teachers exchange.
Okay. Now, students and all staff will, I'm sorry, Kevin, do you want to say something?
I was going to say, Jack, you did reference earlier that the desktops would be wiped down in between classes. So that in the event that
contact areas in the classroom in between classes.
Right. So in the event that classroom is used in back-to-back periods, the surfaces would be wiped down.
All teachers, as Mr. Carey mentioned earlier in the meeting, all teachers and students will be provided with 3 masks to be used, you know, to take them home and wash them and use the next ones. So they will, you know, take possession of 3 masks each. They can wear a mask of their own. We have paper masks just in case they forget all 3 of their masks. But what will happen if you have any student that is non-compliant? This question goes for Mr. Baldeman and then Mr. Joniak.
If a student's not compliant, they can't remain in attendance. There's just no room for play on this. If students are not wearing their masks appropriately, then they're going to have to be exited from the school building for the safety of everybody involved.
Yeah, I think that Ms. Quattrone and I, just following with what Jack is talking about, Ms. Quattrone and I mentioned that I think the administrative team across the district does a nice job. And when students are making poor choices, we try to, you know, take them in and guide them and be understanding and all that. But when it comes to the mask, there's no option. Everybody's wearing a mask, safety first. And we're not going to be messing around saying, oh, come on, buddy, you could wear a mask. You know, we're not having those kind of conversations, unfortunately, playing a little bit of hardball when it comes to safety for everybody.
Okay, back to the high school, because as you discussed, your students are going to be changing classes just like a traditional high school, keeping in mind that half the students will be in the high school one time because of your AB schedule. Is there any kind of structures in place that will ensure social distancing between classes, and talk about sort of what that process is and how kids will go between classes, and also talk about lunch?
Well, Meg may have something to add in a moment, but we have talked about one directional travel between class periods. We are insisting that students maintain social distancing. We've considered reducing the passing period slightly to cut down the amount of congregation. We will, as we always do, monitor the students' travel between class periods, as an example. But I would liken it to when you're in a grocery store, or when you're, you know, there's sometimes you're going to be, but the being less than 6 feet apart will be very temporary, if you will. So it's not something where they're going to be, you know, and normally our students use the passing periods to congregate and to communicate. And that unfortunately is something that's going to have to go by the wayside, that we can't allow that to take place. And during the lunch period, once again, if you would consider, we're going to have, if, you know, even with the greatest number of students in attendance on any one day, we not only split our student body, but we split it again because we have 2 lunch periods. So we're really anticipating approximately 80 to 90 students in lunch at any one time. With social distancing in the commons area, we can accommodate somewhere around 45 students. We've utilized the media center for years during the lunch periods, where we could take on an extra 25 or 30 students. And then we would have another place where students could socially distance and have lunch. During the, when the weather will allow it, we'll encourage students to eat outside. Once again, keep a distance from each other because their masks will be off when they're eating. But between those different venues, we should be able to maintain social distancing during lunch hours.
Okay, the next set of questions is with regard to special ed. They're general questions. Tell me about how will students receive services for special services, and how will they get the attention they need, require and deserve to be successful. Many of the services require in-person time no matter what. And if a student needs to go in for special needs, whether or not it be for IEP or assistance for short term, in short term for a particular subject, is it possible for them to come in person? So I guess that's a lot to unpack, but at any rate, could you kind of give us a sense, Ms. Cloudwater, about how we'll address the needs of our special needs students, and particularly those who need extra support with content area or curriculum?
And thank you. I'm gonna ask the building administrators to help me with this response as well, because I know that a great deal of time and thought went into putting these plans together so that we could maximize the benefit of instruction for all of our students, but certainly taking our students with IEPs, 504s, our ELL students, and students with other special circumstances into account. So the students that are in special education have individual education plans. So in each case, we'll be looking at those plans and determining whether or not the plan as it exists can be appropriately and successfully accomplished through the learning that the district is providing and the parent is opting for. So in some cases, we won't be needing to make any changes to the IEPs because the type of learning that we're providing, and again, what the parents have opted for is a match, and we'll be providing those special ed services in person throughout the school day. For some of our parents who are going to be choosing remote learning, we'll be actually looking at whether or not we need to draft a remote learning plan. And when I say draft, the first step in that is usually that the case managers look at those plans, they look at the IEPs, they look at the goals, they look at the related services. And by related services, I mean speech or occupational therapy, physical therapy, social work. They look at those services and they look at the goals in the IEP, and they make a determination about which of those goals can be accomplished through remote learning and how that can happen. So the case manager is actually the first person that looks that over and really drafts what that remote learning plan could look like. And then the next part of this, which is really critical, is the collaboration with the parent and the input from parents in terms of a parent and a school team reaching consensus about how things will be delivered, how services will be delivered, and how progress toward goals will be monitored. So really any work that has to be done specific to IEPs will be done when we have additional information regarding what the instruction is going to look like at our 5 schools in the district and what parents are opting for within those 5 schools. And so I don't know if that's a comprehensive enough answer, but I'm hoping that my fellow administrators will jump in if I've left something out and talk about your perspective on this.
This is Tim from Miller, and I just wanted to reiterate our need for creating a consistent schedule is very important at the K-1 level. We really want to, whether parents decide to keep their kids home in a remote learning setting or send them to school, we plan on maximizing every minute of the day that our teachers are working with the kids in a very flexible format. Obviously, we want to keep things consistent. So whatever schedule we put in place, whatever times our interventionists or specialists meet with our students, our resource teachers, we want to make sure it's not just on Mondays and Fridays like it was during the spring. We want to make sure it's on a more regular basis so they have contact time and a more rigorous level of exposure to those that can help build their growth and work towards their goals.
Thank you. And then, Ms. Cloudwater, I think you had a question. Did you want to ask? Or?
Yes,
Okay, it's 7:10. I probably have about 30 to 35 emails. Some of them are super short. Mr. Carey, would you like for us to answer these through FAQ, or should we keep going for a few more minutes? What do you think?
Yeah, let's tackle a few more. He's got to pay his Wi-Fi bill.
So attendance will, since we'll be running on a much more structured schedule, attendance will be taken each day in through the use of a form in Google Classroom. That is going to be the high school's consistent platform, as well as utilizing Google, the Google Suite, like with Google Classroom and such, to support the common thread of what platform we'll be using. And attendance will be taken that way. Which will also still transfer to Skyward, so that we can still do the same kind of attendance accountability that we've done previously with our attendance secretary and Mr. Weck, kind of ensuring that our students are maintaining attendance each day as expected. So classes will be run when the class would have been held if the child in the child schedule on remote days.
All right, and then over at the junior high school, we're still working through a couple of things as we are moving from using Otis now. So we are no longer going to be using Google Classroom. We're using Google Apps for Education, but not Google Classroom. So we are going to be having attendance every single day. How that attendance is taken, I don't have that ready for release right now, but it will be taken every day. And then whether that is for those individual classes, but then on the remote learning day, it's going to be partial as a check-in, and then also as a work completion as well. So we'll be sending out more information with that just within the next couple of weeks.
And elementary is similar in that we're not ready to release anything quite yet, but it is a lot easier in a self-contained model where there's less teachers taking attendance. You're looking more at your homeroom, classroom, teacher taking attendance.
Okay, so next question, and these are going to be not in any particular order because I'm just going to go the way they're coming in. So ISBE does not require pre-K or kindergarten. And so is there anything about remote learning or learning in this environment that is specific to pre-K or kindergarten since it's not required?
Tim, you have to unmute yourself.
Me?
Sorry.
No, Tim.
Linda or Ms. Clowder, do you want to go first? Do you want me to talk about kindergarten?
You know, Tim, that's fine. You could see me kind of hesitating because I was trying to just put my thought together. But please, if you're ready to go ahead, and then I'd like to chime in on early childhood, pre-K. So
at the kindergarten level, nothing is obviously set in stone, but we are definitely looking forward to having, if we have in-person learning, looking forward to have kindergartners in the building for the 3.5-hour school day. At that point, we are definitely looking towards not adding any additional remote learning pieces to the kids that were in school for those 3.5 hours. So their day essentially would be done, but we would offer some kind of remote learning experience for families that decide not to send their kindergartners to school and they would like to have them in a seat virtually with a classroom teacher. So that's what we're thinking. We need to kind of navigate through what that looks like and communicate with our teachers and families. But we thought that would open up some resources in terms of working with our first graders and those that chose not to come into the building if we did move forward with the half-day K-1 programming.
Since kindergarten is not required in Illinois, do the kindergarten students and pre-K have to do the full 5 hours?
I want to be sure that I'm answering your question, which is why I'm hesitating, because I want to be sure that I understood it correctly. Our early childhood programs are actually 2.5 hours in the morning and 2.5 hours in the afternoon. So there's not a mandate for our early childhood to have 5 hours a day. But what I was going to say is when I think about, a mandate for pre-K, our pre-K students, our early childhood students, Many of them are there because they have individual education plans, because they've demonstrated that they have a certain area in their development that we need to kind of work together in partnership with families to really shore up at this time. And it's really our opportunity to do that. So if a student has an IEP, there really is a requirement to fulfill that IEP. And that would be one of the reasons that we would want, ideally, we'd want the kids in school. If we interact with him through remote learning, we still need to fulfill that IEP as it was intended, so that we can shore up those areas that I've alluded to. In terms of other children that come to us in our early childhood program, they may not have IEPs, but they may come to us because through preschool screening and other means, we've identified that there's a cohort of at-risk factors that really suggest that building that foundation in these early years is really critical to their successful development and success as they go on through the grades. So we have grants that the district has written for and has been awarded, and those children attend by virtue of those grants. So we certainly want those kids to continue their education, because we've identified that that's necessary, and we've reached out to get a grant in order to provide that. So I hesitate again, because I really see early childhood as being, I understand it's not mandated, but for the children that we're serving in our program, it's critical, and it's been identified as an area of need. So we certainly want to address the education of our early childhood pre-K kids.
Thank you.
And just one other thing, Nadine, with regards to the kindergarten, and if we're referring to remote learning, the ISB guidelines reference 5 hours, and it doesn't specify only 1 through 12. So our take on that is, unless we receive additional guidance from the ISB, that we would try to create the same learning environment for our kindergarten students. But again, we may get additional guidance where kindergarten will be treated differently, and there wouldn't be an expectation that it would be the 5 hours.
If a parent elects remote learning for the elementary level, would the attendance be allowed, will attendance be flexible in terms of whether or not the student is engaged in learning, not necessarily during the school day, but in the evening because the parent is working? This is for the elementary principals.
I think we always aim to be flexible, and in a small district, we answer phone calls and emails at all times to find a plan that works for each student. This is where it gets tough, because it becomes very hard in public education to design a system that works for everyone. So our goal would be to set up, like we said, a very structured remote learning plan. And as individual families may have different needs, then that's somewhere where we reach out individually and talk with classroom teachers about how we can accommodate, because we're very aware that when we're not in school 5 days a week, especially for students in the elementary, that some form of daycare for working families is a hot topic right now. So there is no, we won't say we won't be flexible, but it's important to know that we have to design a model that works for as many people as possible, so that the staff can appropriately accommodate as well.
This one is for the junior high. How will exploratory classes be structured? Full credit courses like band and in-school or hybrid remote? These classes are typically collaborated effort with students and peers. How will the courses continue to be collaborative for exploratory if the classes are remote?
All right, well, we've already started working. I'll bring up Mr. Troyer as regards to choir right now. There's 4 different programs, subscriptions that Mr. Troyer and I have been working at making available to our students. And he believes that these will help him greatly in providing that remote learning experience for our students that are in choir. I have additionally reached out to our band teacher, and she's given a couple of different ideas as well. In regards to industrial arts, that's going to be a tough one, everybody. I think we know that, but there are things out there like CAD programs. Does that look like the same thing as wood shop? Can we take a wood shop and bring it to your home? I don't think so, but we're in for different ideas. So we're working with those teachers in regards to what the experiences are going to be at the school during the in-person programming. But the realities are that the in-person and specifically the remote exploratory experiences are going to look different this year than they have in the past. And additionally, some of the classes, when we're talking about, I know that Mr. Balderman was talking about choir and band and what that's going to be looking like. We are trying to work with what ISB's given us, besides large classrooms, like we're talking about 12 students in the entire gymnasium practicing with their instruments. We're trying to look to see what makes sense, but more so what's going to be safe and then what makes sense. And if we can do both, then we're going to make something happen. Otherwise, the exploratory class that the students chose to go into may look different for 2020-21 during this pandemic.
Thank you. The parent wants us to clarify, if they select in person, the Manning and Miller are half-day programs. The students do not stay for lunch. Junior high is a half-day program and it's an AB schedule, and then the high school is an AB schedule. If a parent, that's the two options are the program, the way it's laid out, versus all remote, just to clarify. And parents need to, Mr. Carey, you sent out a survey for parents that you're collecting data by student to determine whether or not the student will come all remote or go to school based on the plan for K1, pre-K, obviously K1, 2-5, junior high and high school. The final decision in terms of whether or not the student will be in their seat if we are in person is say that again, right, the August board meeting?
Right, the August 4th board meeting is when we'll make a recommendation to the board.
Okay.
With the caveat, it is again very fluid. And so that'll be as of August 4th at that time in the evening. This is what a recommendation is.
And the data that we're collecting so far is going to help us with staffing. So right now we don't necessarily have, I believe Mr. Weiler talked about, right now we can't give you your homeroom teacher if you're a first grade student, because the staffing is dependent on the number of students that are reporting that they're coming to the building. Is that right, Mr. Weiler?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thanks. Any answer? Bear with me for just a second, guys.
Sure.
Well, fees.
I was just going to say, I make a comment because we're getting a lot of questions. Can we switch our choice? And it's just a really hard choice. So can I just reiterate something, is that the best choice is going to be the best choice for your family. There is no right choice. On our end, we need choices to be made, even though they're tough, so that we can plan appropriately for all safest scenarios. So I know it weighs heavy on every single one's heart. We can provide guidance, but you need to go with your family as what a gut feeling is. And we will do our best, as we always do, to work with each family to be successful throughout the year. But that is a reoccurring email and phone call that comes in over the past couple of days with that survey.
Well said. The other thing I wanted to clarify, when we're talking about remote learning, we don't expect students to be in front of their computer for 5 hours. When the 5-hour guidance was 5 hours of learning, and that includes interaction with teachers, interaction with their peers, independent learning, things that you do on paper, experiments you do outside, fitness that you might do, running around the block or whatever. So the 5 hours of learning per day is not, you're not going to set a 6-year-old in front of a computer for 5 hours. The learning is going to be designed to be, lots of different learning experiences. So I hope that helps clarify. Will fees be adjusted if only if in person 2 days a week, including parking fees. So this would be for the high school.
That's not just, yeah, I appreciate your question, but that's not just under my jurisdiction. Mr. Carey, would you, I'm assuming perhaps they would be, I don't know.
Right.
Parking.
Yes, some of those fees would be prorated based upon what the student experiences.
The students will, teachers are still going to be interacting with students. They
Right.
still have full staff and full teaching and learning for those, even if you choose remote. So it's not, so fees would not be adjusted for if parents decided to send their kid to remote.
Right. The course fees wouldn't be, but I'm thinking something like parking.
Mm-hmm.
That would be something that we'd have to consider and prorate that.
Oh, I got a thanks for answering the question. Okay. What happens if a child tests for COVID? Is there a protocol yet? And will the class have to quarantine? Mr. Carey, could you just kind of reiterate
Sure.
what you said about the...
What happens if we have a student test positive, we would contact Page County Public Health. And then there would be a series of questions that we would have to answer. We would need to know if there was social distancing that took place, if students were wearing masks, all those things. And that ultimately determines who has to quarantine. And what we've heard in preliminarily from DuPage Public Health is if we're following all those protocols and guidelines, then unless other students were having symptoms, there would be no need for those students to quarantine. But if we're not observing social distancing of 6 feet, if we're not wearing masks, then that's when additional individuals would need to quarantine.
What safety precautions have been put in place for office staff? That's one question, because I know there's specific safety precautions for office staff. And then teaching assistants who have regular and close contact with their students. Could you talk about that?
Sure. And in terms of office staff, we're installing plexiglass barriers. Staff will also wear masks. Any visitors to our buildings will have to wear masks as well. And we're going to really try to minimize the number of visitors that we have. And so, parents will need to contact the schools, make appointments, which is counter to how we've had our buildings operate in the past. And then what was the second part?
The teaching assistants that have close contact with students.
Sure. And with teaching assistants, it depends on what their role is and what the nature of the contact is. Again, we would try to maintain social distancing. We know that that's not always possible. Again, it's that if it's less than 15 minutes, then that's less of a concern. If it's more than 15 minutes, but in some cases, in addition to a mask, there may be a face shield, there may be a gown, there may be gloves. It all depends on the nature of the interaction and what that close contact would entail.
I have a question. Can the language program be expanded for remote learning and include more students? I am not sure. Oh, this is for, dual language. So the dual language program for, now just to clarify, dual language kindergarten, first grade is going to be at Miller. Dual language 2nd through 5th will be at Manning. So this would be for Miller. If we're using remote learning, can we bring more kids into the dual language program for the kindergarten, first grade, which is when we take kids in?
Yes. That is a question that we can look into. I definitely have not looked into that question before, and I would definitely want to bring in the teachers and the dual language team and Ms. Moyer on trying to come up with an answer for that one.
Part of the limiting factor with dual language historically has always been that it's the number of Spanish speaking students we have in a class, because our current model, we like to have a 50-50 blend, 50-50 monolingual English speakers, and then 50% of the class is Spanish speaking. And so even in the event that you're remote learning, sometimes if you don't have enough of the Spanish speaking students we're not able to expand the enrollment.
And now we're switching topics to band for 5th grade. If students are remote only, how will band work for the 5th graders? Oof, lost Ms. Peterzak. We have our band teacher for the 5th grade is new, correct? This year, you guys?
Right.
Yeah.
We're very excited. We have a great new band director who is very eager to work with the 5th grade students. But I'll let Ms. Peterzak and Mr. Weiler answer that question.
She's back.
And Nadine, this will be our last question,
crazy.
Nadine.
Okay.
I think one of the benefits that we have in moving to grade level centers temporarily is that all 5th grade students are housed together, and so less travel for that teacher. We do have in some of our planning, as we always have, that band occurs in the morning so that it can coordinate with the high school schedule. We need to think about all of the impacts of a teacher traveling, and so keeping in mind, is it best to start in person or remotely, or even pause that? I think getting students in our master schedule done first and core instruction is the primary focus, and then the next step would be looking at band.
Okay, thanks so much. Since it's our last question, I just wanted to let parents know I have a ton of questions that and I didn't go in the order that they were received, and I apologize for that. That was just me trying to do things quickly. The questions that we haven't read yet, we will read them, and we will get you answers to those specific questions. A lot of what we're getting questions that are kind of things that we'd already addressed, but we'll make sure that all of your questions are answered. And we'll put together a FAQ for things that are of high importance, particularly safety measures and those types of things. And then individual situations where families are asking about how to meet the needs of their own family. As Lindsay Peterzak talked about, that ongoing communication, that close collaboration between our families and our principals is really important to us, and that everyone will make contact with you and make sure that you have everything you need, all the information you need to make an informed decision on what you're going to do this fall for your students. So I'm just apologizing for all the questions that I wasn't able to ask out loud.
Thanks, Nadine. But just to wrap this up, I just wanted to thank all of our parents who have been viewing us and submitting questions. And as Nadine pointed out, you know, we know that we didn't get to some of the questions. We will answer those questions. We'll keep a running FAQ on our district website, because even after tonight, parents may have some questions, and we want to make sure that we answer those. But I also wanted to thank our admin team this evening. And we also have a couple of our administrators who were not available this evening: Kevin Weck, Kim Anderson, Sandy Moyer. But I said this at our board meeting on July 21st, just about how, you know, this is an amazing group, and they're such a compassionate group of administrators, and the number of hours that they have been putting in this summer, trying to put together the best, the safest plan for our students and our staff is just amazing. And I know many of us have had many sleepless nights, because we want to make sure that what we do this fall is what is best for our students and our staff and for their health and their well-being. And I just want to thank all of them for all their efforts. It's an amazing group. Again, thank you to our staff. Again, we'll be making a recommendation at our Tuesday board meeting, August 4th. And again, I'm always cautious. Things can change before we get to August 24th, the first day for our student attendance. But thank you, families, for your patience. We appreciate your support, and we're all in this together. We're all pulling together, and we all want the same thing. We want what's best for our students and for our staff. So with that, I'm going to say good night, and thank you again.